I watched this video. I became afraid. Is it a crime to adopt a child? Is it a crime to train a child you did not give birth to? A true life story. Mrs. Agatha Nwosu was a brilliant teacher at St. Charles Memorial College in Lagos. She is married to Ndubisi, a well-known businessman, and they have been married for 15 years. Their marriage was blessed with a son, Gozie, who was 14 years old. Their lives were peaceful and perfect, not until tragedy struck one year. Mr. Ndubisi was coming back from work and a heavy rain struck and pushed down an electric pole, falling on top of his car. Then, he got electrocuted and died at the spot. The news spread, reaching Mrs. Agatha, who cried and cried. For months, she grieved the death of her beloved husband, thinking that's all. On a fateful morning, Gozie told his mother that he wanted to step outside to play with his friends because the house has been so boring since the loss of their father. Mrs. Agatha agreed and told him not to stay out too long and be back before sunset. He agreed and zoomed out with his friends. While they were catching up, one of his friends suggested they should go to the beach to have some fun, which they all agreed and set to the beach. On reaching the beach, it was very lively environment and everybody was catching fun. Some playing on the sand while others swimming. Immediately, his friend decided to swim, but Gozie was scared because he has never swum before. But with the pressure that was coming from his friends, and he gave in after they assured him that they won't be going deep into the water. So he agreed and stepped into the water with them. But immediately he stepped in and tried to swim. He started drowning. He tried to call out for help, but it became worse. Water was entering his eyes and his nose. His friends tried to help him, but they couldn't so much because they don't know how to swim. His friends screamed and ran to the shore to get help, but before help could come, he drowned. Agatha's world crumbled as she heard the news. For years she grieved. The house was so empty, so quiet. Her heart was too heavy, but desperate to fill the void in her heart, she visited St. Charles Memorial Orphanage, where she met a tiny baby boy, barely a year old. The child had no family, no history, just innocent eyes staring up at her. Her heart melted. Without hesitation, she adopted him and named him Obinna, meaning father's heart. She poured out her love into raising him, determined to give him a bright future. Obinna was Agatha's world. She took him everywhere when he was little. When she went to work, he sat beside her, playing with his books. She held his hand while crossing the road, fed him the best meals and kissed his forehead every night. To her, he was her son, not adopted, not different, just hers. As he grew older, she enrolled him in the best schools. She made sure he had everything he needed. Obinna was intelligent, and she was proud of him. When he turned 10, she sent him to a boarding school to give him the best education. It was difficult for her, but she believed it was the right choice. But something changed when he left home. He returned for holidays, distant and uninterested in their once close bond. He spent more time outside, hanging out with new friends she didn't know of, and one of them a boy named Wenga. Wenga was older, street smart and full of bad ideas. He had no respect for adults, always talking about how they were weak and controlling. He whispered things to Obinna, things that poisoned his young mind. Do you know if she's really your mother? Benga asked one evening. Obinna frowned. Of course she is. She loves me so much. Benga smiled. Then, why do people say she adopted you? She is not your real mother, John, and when she dies, everything will be yours. Obinna did not know what to say. He had never questioned his place in the family before. But now, doubt crept into his heart. Obinna confronted Agatha that night. Is it true? Did you adopt me? Agatha's heart broke. She had hoped to tell him when he's older. But now, she had no choice. Yes, my son. But that doesn't change anything. You are my child. I love you so much. I love you as much as any mother would love her own. But Obinna was no longer interested. The damage has been done. In his mind, she was not his real mother, just a woman who had taken him in. According to Benga, if she was gone, all her money, her house and everything she had worked for would belong to him. From that day on, Obinna began to pull away from Agatha. He no longer called her Mama with love. He avoided her touch, her questions and her care. Agatha was confused, hurt, but she believed he was just going through a phase. He spent more time with Benga. The older boy taught him about life in the streets, how to lie, and how to manipulate people. He told him that emotions made a person weak. He filled Obinna's heart with greed, teaching him that money and power were all that matters. And then, one day, Benga planted the final idea. She's old now. She doesn't even have a husband or children. When she dies, everything she has will be yours. Why wait? Obinna hesitated at first. Mother was a big step, but Benga made it sound so easy. Accidents happen all the time, he said. Make it look like one. Obinna's mind raced. Could he really do it? Agatha had given him everything, but Benga's voice echoed in his mind. She is not your real mother, so she doesn't matter. The plan was simple. He would wait until she was alone, then push her from a high place. It had to look like an accident. That way no one would suspect him. The night before he carried his plan, Agatha called him into her room. Obinna, my son, I love you, she said, touching his face. No matter what, I will always love you. For a moment, duty crept into his heart. But then, he remembered Benga's words. He forced himself to stay cold. He only nodded, then walked away. It was early in the morning. Agatha was asleep. Obinna sneaked upstairs, making sure he made no sounds. When he got to the rooftop, he removed the tank cover and threw it on the ground, making a loud noise. Immediately, Agatha woke up from her sleep, wondering what must have made that loud sound. So, as expected, Agatha stood up from her bed and made her way upstairs to check where the sounds were coming from. She stepped onto the decking, looking confused. "Who is there?" she called. Obinna hid behind two large tanks. When she turned her back, he pushed her. She screamed as she fell, hitting the ground with a sneaking crack. And then, silence. Obinna stood there, staring at her lifeless body. He felt nothing. No fear, no regrets, just emptiness. He picked up her phone immediately and called the neighbors. "Something happened," he said calmly. "Mama fell." The neighbors rushed over. saw the body and screamed. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Mrs. Agatha Nwos lying on the ground, her head bleeding. There were no witnesses, and at first, it seemed like a tragic accident. Obinna stood there, calm and emotionless. He had been the one who called the neighbor, and who then called the police. The officer began questioning him. "How did you find her?" one officer asked. "I heard a noise, and I came outside," Obinna said flatly. The officer looked at him closely. Something about the boy's calmness was unsettling. Most children who find their parents dead are in shock, crying or panicking, but Obinna just stood there. The officer then noticed something odd. A water tank cover lay on the ground, far from its usual place. It has clearly been thrown, not just dropped by accident. The officer turned to Obinna again. "Did you see how she fell?" Obinna shook his head. "No." That was the first lie, and the officers will soon uncover more. The police started their investigation by speaking to the neighbors. One neighbor said, "I saw Obinna yesterday. He wasn't acting like himself. He was quiet and lost in thought." Another neighbor, who had known Mrs. Wosu for years, said, "She loved that boy so much, but recently she was worried. She said he had changed, that he had become distant." The police took notes. Something didn't add up. Then, an officer went inside the house to check for any clues. That was when they found something strange. Obinna's school bag was inside the house. This was important because Obinna had told the police he slept at the church overnight. The officer picked up the bag and opened it. Inside, they found his shoes, but they were wet and had dust on them. Now, the police were suspicious. If Obinna had gone to church, why were his shoes inside the bag, wet and dusty? Why had he hidden them instead of wearing them? An officer called Obinna over. "Tell us again, where were you last night?" "I was at the church," Obinna said. The officer showed him the bag. "Then, why are your shoes inside the house, hidden in your bag? And why are they wet and dirty?" Obinna looked at the shoes, but said nothing. The officers knew they had caught him in a lie. If he had been in the church, his shoes should be very clean. Even if it has been raining, his shoes should have been wet on his feet, not hidden in his bag. The officers pressed on. "Where did you go last night, Obinna?" But he couldn't say anything. The house itself had no security cameras, but a neighbor across the street had a small CCTV camera facing the road. The officer asked to check the footage. The camera did not capture the actual moment of the crime, but it showed something very important. At 4:30 a.m., Obinna was seen sneaking back into the compound. This was proof that he had not been in church all night as he claimed. He had been somewhere else before returning home. The police now had clear evidence that Obinna was lying. One officer returned to question him again. "Obinna, the camera shows you sneaking back home at 4:30 a.m. If you were at the church all night, how is that possible?" Obinna's expression remained blank. The officer continued, "And why were your shoes wet and dirty? If you were inside a church, your shoes should have been clean. But if you were outside, maybe climbing something, maybe standing near a water tank, then they would be wet and dirty, right?" Obinna's fingers twitched. He knew he was caught. The officer leaned in. "Tell us the truth, Obinna. Did you push her?" Obinna remained silent for a long time. Then he finally spoke. "Yes." The officer stared at him in shock. "You pushed her?" one officer asked, trying to confirm. "Yes," Obinna repeated. with no emotions. "Why did you do that?" "She wasn't my real mother," he said flatly, "and she told me to leave her house." The way he spoke, so cold, so unbothered, made their skin crawl. After Obinna's confession, the police wanted to know more. Why would a 14-year-old boy kill the woman who raised him? That was when Benga's name came up. The police investigated and found that Benga has been influencing Obinna for months. They tracked down Benga and searched his phone. What they found was chilling. One of the messages Benga sent to Obinna read, "If you push her, everything will be yours. Don't be weak." This proved that Benga had manipulated Obinna into believing that killing his adoptive mother would give him instant wealth and freedom. Benga was arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. Obinna's case shocked the entire country. Newspapers and TV stations covered it. People couldn't believe that a young boy had done something so terrible. In court, the evidence was presented. The CCTV footage that showed Obinna sneaking back home at 4:30 a.m. His own confession, the hidden shoes with dust and water stains, proved he had been outside near the tank. The thrown water tank cover, showing someone had deliberately made noise to lure Mrs. Wonsu outside. And the message from Benga proving Obinna had been influenced. The defense tried to argue that Obinna was just a child and had been brainwashed by Benga, but the judge was firm. The court was silent as the judge gave its verdict. "Obinna Wonsu, you have committed a grave crime. You killed the woman who gave you everything without remorse. However, because you are a minor, you will not face life imprisonment. Instead, you are sentenced to 20 years in juvenile detention." Benga was sentenced to 25 years in prison for manipulating a minor into committing murder. The case was over, but the impact would last forever. Inside the juvenile center, Obinna was no longer treated like a boy. He was just another criminal. The other inmates talked about him. Some were afraid of him, others bullied him, calling him the boy who killed his own mother. At night, lying in his cold bed, he stared at the ceiling. Did he regret what he had done? No. Or maybe, deep inside, he did. The story of Obinna and Agatha became a national lesson. Parents became more careful about friends their children kept. School began teaching about dangers of peer influence. Some people blamed Obinna's action on Benga's manipulation. Others believed he was simply born without a conscience. But one fact remained. A woman who gave everything lost her life at the hands of the child she loved the most. And in the end, no inheritance, no money, no freedom could ever replace a mother's love. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for sticking to the end. Please do comment what you learned from this story, like and share, and follow for more. Thank you very much. Till we meet in my next video. Bye bye.